Former Public Enterprises Minister Barbara Hogan says Eskom leadership was in a crisis in 2009. Testifying at the state capture inquiry, Hogan detailed repeated engagements with the former President Jacob Zuma over the former Eskom CEO Jacob Maroga. Hogan claims Zuma had said Maroga would return as CEO. This even though the board was of the view he had resigned. Hogan says the move caused havoc. So apparent political meddling at Eskom dating back several years. But has anything changed today? Well, I'm joined now on the couch in our studio by energy analyst Chris Yelland. Chris, good morning. Thank you very much for coming in. For a long time now, you've been watching the developments at Eskom.
Great.
When you read, or if you listened to her yesterday, in the last couple of days, Barbara Hogan testifying about what was going on, particularly in this case in 2009 with Jacob Maroga. What goes through your mind?
Yeah, well, she paints a picture of repeated interference from the president at the time, President Zuma, in the business and appointments at state-owned enterprises and in particular at Eskom. And she found it very disturbing to have this kind of interference, which she felt was completely irregular. But things have certainly changed since then.
Yeah, before we talk about what might have changed since then, I mean, it's very clear from Barbara Hogan that her understanding of the role of her department is oversight, not to operationally run the state-owned enterprise, in this case Eskom.
Yeah.
The board had strategic oversight, and she as a minister was representing the shareholder, so to speak, with the government. That shareholders don't get involved in the day-to-day running. But in this case, it looks like President Jacob Zuma was really upset with her sometime, even phoning her from overseas to say Jacob Maroga must go back.
Yeah, look, the shareholder should not interfere in the operations of the business. That is the responsibility of the board and the management. But the Minister of Public Enterprise, as a shareholder representative, does have oversight. But what role does the President of South Africa have in instructing the Minister of Public Enterprises on who to appoint and who not to appoint at the executive level? So it does seem to me to be highly irregular and a symptom of that whole era.
Yeah. Isn't it a bit ironic that yesterday power outages stopped Barbara Hogan's testimony, and apparently she'll be going back today because the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo got a bit frustrated after an hour of power interruptions while she was talking about all these challenges at Eskom. Has anything changed in your view in terms of that kind of interference from the top echelons of state directly into Eskom, for example?
Yeah, I do think a lot has changed. Essentially, President Zuma has changed, and we have a new president who has a different approach and style. And I think we've also got a new board at Eskom and a new chairman of Eskom and a new Minister of Public Enterprises. So all of these things have changed, and I think certainly...
Have they changed for the better?
Well, I think time will still tell. But certainly the board has been given the task to look at the different options going forward for Eskom in its future strategy and its business model. And we're expecting that the board of Eskom or the CEO of Eskom will be advising the DPE of its strategy or its vision to the shareholder this week and really putting the options on the table for the shareholder to make some very serious shareholder decisions on the future structure of Eskom.
So could we say that Mr. Phakamile Hadebe, as Chief Executive of Eskom, and his team are practically being left alone to come up with this new strategy and present it to the shareholder without undue political interference, either from the presidency or from Luthuli House?
Well, of course, there are always political pressures in one form or another, I'm sure. But the job of the business and the executives and the management is to make really put together some plans. Now, these decisions are not Eskom decisions to make in the end because they concern the structure of Eskom, but they are presenting, I believe, the options to the shareholder and being left to do that work properly, employing consultants, yes, to get proper advice, but ultimately giving this information to the shareholder to make its decisions.
Okay, I mean, concerning was statements coming out of Eskom yesterday from Kulu Pasiwe, the spokesperson, saying we could have load shedding, we're having this coal problem, currently they've signed some new contracts and stuff like that. That also would not really bode well for President Ramaphosa's investment drive.
100%, and not only that, there's a lot of fires burning at Eskom, at a financial level, at an operational level, at a strategic level, at an environmental level. And all of this is happening in the lead up to the elections. And I believe that, in fact, we're going to see President Ramaphosa, in his State of the Nation address, making some very serious announcements and decisions for Eskom going forward. And that is in the lead up to the election. And I think he's going to be seen as the only man in town with a real plan on his table.
Okay, very briefly, are you confident, as an energy analyst who's been watching Eskom throughout the years, that whatever fires are burning now, there is today willingness and the ability to put them out?
There's certainly the determination and willingness and awareness. But when you live close to the edge for so long, there is a possibility of falling off the edge. And that's what they've got to work on very hard. But it's all a case sometimes of probabilities and statistics and unforeseen circumstances. And where is the next punch coming from? Right now, the rains could be a blow to South Africa's Eskom. If we have heavy rains that affect the coal stockpiles, the very low stockpiles, this could push Eskom over the edge in terms of load shedding. But I think people are very aware of it and are working hard to avoid it.
Thank you very much. That's Chris Yelland, energy analyst.